Okay. So fly high for the first bit. Just remember, what's the big where we're trying to get to? And here's the kind of, we need to get a recruiting or a serve chat going, those purple arrows. We need to ideally get them into ministry teams because most churches have rosters, but we want people to land into a vehicle for ministry that's going to really capture them well, where they can own it and it will be discipling them. And it's a great thing to be experiencing. Generally, teams are better than rosters. I want to speak to that. And I've already spoken to why leadership matters. So there's the big idea. But in this time, I want to briefly talk to you about that serve chat bit, the recruiting bit, and the teams bit. So here's a quick fly over that. You've got rosters. Now there's some pros. Actually quite can't see it. The tasks get done. There's less preparation time. There's less time commitments. The con, of course, is less responsibility, less ownership, less quality, less reliability, and less strengthening of convictions in serving the Lord as they do it. That's a roster, a team. The con is, of course, it does take greater time commitment, greater responsibility and demand. There's pros. You can see them and you can read them quickly. There is this growth in maturity. The team will own the outcome of that ministry, and what we call little discipling. All sorts of things happen as you do ministry shoulder to shoulder with your brothers and sisters in Christ. As you push each other, you get to know each other, you connect, you have fun, but you'll also grow. So the next one. Okay, so moving from rosters to teams. Well, when do you do it? We don't have to do it straight away. When the outcome is damaged by being a roster, when the roster system becomes too resource hungry, when the pain of not doing it is greater than the pain of doing it. So, yeah, but you just do need to know, once you get teams going, they will suck people out of rosters because teams are a much better experience for people in the ministry. Next one. But here you go, all at once. Some ministries can stay rosters a long time without being a problem. It does take time to move from rosters to team, so one at a time or one area at a time. It is a culture shift. It will take time, sometimes years. That's okay. Next one. We'll keep going. And then here's the serve chat, right? How are we going to get this recruiting and deployment kind of area working? Now, there's our kind of pathway I've got there. So someone's new to church, and then we want to connect them into church. In our church, we have a thing called Startup. That's our kind of connection, integration gathering event. Then we get them into growth groups. And that's just after that point, we have a serve chat. Now, what are you recruiting people to? Well, we're trying to recruit people to a team, not to a task. We think that has much better outcomes for them. Well, next slide. I think I've already answered these questions. Who do you need in this serve chat? How many people do I need? You don't need many. It's probably one or two per congregation. Maybe as the congregation gets larger, it's 3 or 4. But the more challenging question is what type of person? And there's two things there. They need to be. What I've observed is this is probably our most intensive one-to-one conversation we have with someone as they come into church, where you're actually asking, when did you become a Christian? What was your experience in ministry in the previous church? What are you doing in your life? And what that uncovers is all sorts of thinking, maybe not so great thinking, some theological things they might need to work through. It's pastoral. So the person who has this chat needs to be pastoral. But the second thing is they need to know what will it feel like or look like in these different ministries in which people will be placed. So that requires someone who has experience in church who's able to do that. So you need someone who's quite a high-functioning person to do that. It's why typically it is staff who are heavily involved in this in the beginning, until others are trained up in doing it. Next one. Okay, so the serve chat content, what is it? Well, it's relational, it's theologically driven, and it's practical. I'll keep going. Next slide, just quickly through these. Relationally, what are the kind of things you want to chat to them about? Well, their family and background, the Christian church background, how long have they been at church, what have they loved, what have been the challenges, how have they found their growth group, what's their history of serving, what's the things they've done in the past, what's been their experience. Maybe they've been burnt out, they had bad experience, you need to work that through. Second thing is, it does need to have some theological input into reminding people why they serve. It's essentially about serving the Lord. Then we'll keep going. We've used these sorts of big picture things just to help people appreciate different aspects of church diagrammatically and the different teams in which they could jump into. So that they found that quite helpful to have in picture form as they think about the different things they might like to be part of. Next one, it's practical. You'll need to get their input. What are they hoping to do in church? What would they like to do? What do they think their gifts are, their abilities, their experience? And then chatting through the current opportunities, for instance, using that diagram I just talked about. You might agree on a ministry or connect up a bit later as you've kind of worked out maybe with team leaders whether they want this, whether they'd be well placed in certain ministries. Because there's two things here in deployment. You've got to deal with the person themselves, but you've also got to deal with what are the needs of church and how do we place them well, if that makes sense. Next one, Tom. So here you go. How do you allocate limited resources? And so here is here's a quick, here's our Google Doc, if you like, or it's an Excel spreadsheet of the person themselves, the conversations that are happening. So the kind of a process, you might argue, of that. And that's from the people side of things. And then the next ones these are from the church's point of view. What do we think are the needs of church? And you can see our teams there. They put coloured codes in. So catering, they're saying they want 20 cooks and they've got 20 sort of slots there, and then they'll put people in that. And next slide, you could see we just do this for all areas of church. And so we are aware of what's the gap in our resources and then try and fill them. And then, of course, prioritisation is also a question there because the squeaky wheel doesn't necessarily get the oil. There's some reflection questions. You want to audit where do you have teams versus, say, rosters. You might go through the church roles and note leaders or potential leaders who you could get. What are the areas of church where you might want to prioritise creating teams in? Where's the first areas to move on? And then you might want to audit your serve process and prioritise the next steps. Do you need to find a serve chat team? Well, it depends on where church is at. I'll hand over to James now, and he can give you some flesh on it in his area.
Yeah, so it's two things, one leadership development and then one on recruiting. I think developing leaders, to be honest, is probably the hardest thing to do in church because Sunday is coming. Sunday's always going to be there. There's a sermon to write. There's music to put up. There's people. It's every week, and so because that's a need and it's coming, you gravitate towards Sunday in terms of having the time to stop and to develop and train and meet with leaders. It can easily just go by the wayside. So. Two things. One, we do better than the other in terms of to keep training our leaders on the agenda. One of them is we, a couple of years ago, started an all leaders training night. We do it twice a year, one at the beginning of February, and we've got another one coming up in 2 weeks' time. And that is where we get everyone who's a leader, a team leader or an area leader, no matter what ministry you're in, all together. And the purpose of this night is, I guess, three purposes. One is to honour them. So we make nice, good food and aesthetically it looks good, so we honour them. That's the first. The second thing is we do all-in training together. So where Rhett said, in terms of there's, I think it was 60% of being, no matter who you're leading or what ministry you're in, is transferable. So there's, back on that table which you saw before with all the colours that you probably couldn't read, there's 6 core abilities, competencies that a leader needs to have in terms of working with people, thinking through teamwork, in terms of discipleship, in terms of strategy. So we, over 3 years, do one every training night. So in 2 weeks' time, our focus is on people. So I, along with Betsy, our Wellbeing Care Director, we're going to talk about training people on how to lead yourself, how to lead people you don't like, and then how to lead that invokes change. So in terms of feedback and that kind of thing. So that's our focus, and that'll be applied to anyone, whether you're leading kids, whether you're leading adults in connect groups, whether you're leading a serving team, whatever it is. So that then basically takes the weight off all the other people who are wanting to train. Let's do it together. Let's be efficient and doing that. And then the third aspect of that night is they go into ministry areas for skill-specific things. So that might be learning about what's coming up for Connect leaders in terms of a series on Deuteronomy or anthropology or whatever it is, or how can we train for welcome teams to welcome well, or new systems, those kind of things, so specific things. So 3 purposes: to honor them, to do all in training, and then skills training. And so that's happens twice a year. So that's one thing we did. The second aspect of that is between those, because it's so easy to recruit a leader and then forget about them and then see them at the end of the year where you want to re-recruit them for the next year. To try and keep us accountable in terms of meeting with your leaders, I've realized the diary in our culture is the infallible document. So no one questions it. You try and just go with it. If it's in your diary, you just do it. And so use that to your advantage, where when it comes to the leaders that you're meeting with, actually put in your diary invitations, 2-3 times a year, space them out, and do that at the beginning of the year so they know you know. And when it comes to that week, you're probably thinking, oh, Sunday's coming, I can't have the time, but all right, it's in the diary. And so that's accountability, which I have found helpful. And I'm trying the other staff to, let's just do this as a culture. We're keeping us accountable in terms of we recruited leaders, but we want to meet with them, train them, and not just forget about them. So that's in that aspect. In terms of recruiting people to serve, so we do at Church by the Bridge similar thing with Rhett and EV, where we have a newcomers course. We call it Belonging, which has been profoundly helpful. With my membership hat on, I'm a big believer that I don't want people coming to church and feeling like they're a member through osmosis, like I've sort of been here for a couple of weeks or months and I think I'm a member, but rather to be a conscious decision. This is now my church. I'm a member of it. So the Belonging course helps that, where it puts everything on the table. And one of what we're on about, what we believe, what it means to be a part of our church. And then following that, we do a post-belonging catch-up. So generally it's staff-led, but there we go through similar things to what Rhett talked about. Work out, are they a Christian? If not, let's send them to explore and talk about giving, joining Connect Group, but also one of them is serving. So we use the Serve booklet. They're kind of aware and beginning that conversation of how do you want to serve. And everyone who does it's a profoundly helpful exercise to do for yourself, but also too for those who are joining your church, because they kind of know, all right, this is what I expected. I'm now part of this church, and I'm not falling through the cracks, and so beginning to serve in that way. I've realized over the years, we always need people to serve. And so our default is to send an email or to stand up in church and say, we're really desperate, will you need ... That generally doesn't work. It's good for you as a cathartic experience. It's kind of like wearing exercise clothes but not going to the gym. You kind of do it because you feel good, but it has no effect. It has very little effect, I would say. Often we find the best way is actually asking people, hey, I think you'd be really good in serving this way. Would you consider that? Now, if it's all based on my voice, then that's a lot of pressure. I don't have much time. But creating a culture where actually if people are leading these positions, can they begin to ask, hey, I've noticed this, can you come on board in this team, and that kind of thing. So it's not just my voice, but it's many voices seeking to empower others to serve others. So I learned this where I had to recruit welcoming team leaders across 8 different services at the time, and that's daunting. But what I found is, can I get the area leaders to begin a conversation with someone who they think? And so we workshopped it a bit. And I was thinking, oh, look, they're going to get a whole bunch of no's. They got mostly yeses. So it was a humbling experience for me. But I learned that they might not respond to my voice, but they might respond to another leader's voice in the church to hear the call to come and serve and to be a leader. Yeah.
That's great. I'm going to ask Rhett to come on very briefly. What was really helpful, just to reflect on some of the things you just pulled out there, was I guess the importance of poetry and plumbing. If the poetry's out there, then it does make it easy for your surf team to have that ask and get them on board. Now, there's a lot of information today, and so we're going to send a follow-up email with links to some other resources you can catch out. Can I just draw your attention to one of the things that both Rhett and James spoke about, which was the Building Leaders Days. We've got a number of days coming up over the next few months in Melbourne, in Brisbane, in the Central Coast, one coming up on the weekend in Albany, all the way over in WA as well. If that's something that you think would be helpful for your church, reach out to us, reach out to Tom. We are more than happy to come to your church on a Saturday and run that event for your team leaders and some of your key teams. That really turbocharges everything. It also gives your team some shared language as well. So we've done that now for a number of churches, and it'd be great, if you'd invite, 4 or 5 churches in the region so we can have a good day, a good solid day of training on a Saturday as well. So reach out to us and we can talk to you about that. Thanks very much, guys. Awesome to talk about this important area in church life.
Thank you.
Great to be part of it.